Hey, just wanted to mention a quick content warning ahead of time here. In case you're unaware, It's a Wonderful Life, the main plot point revolves around the main character contemplating suicide. So we discuss suicide throughout the episode here and there. A couple times we get into a little bit of like more in-depth discussions of depression and stuff like that. So just a heads up, if that's something you don't feel comfortable listening to right now, might want to skip this episode. Otherwise, hope you enjoy.
This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian, and I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
So prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide if the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because this film is lit. Remember, George, no man is a failure who has friends. It's a Wonderful Life, and this film is lit. Hello and welcome back to This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. I don't know how we've gone 5 years, however many years we've been doing this and haven't done It's a Wonderful Life yet, but...
This is one that I think a lot of people don't realize is based on a book.
That's fair.
I didn't for a long time.
I had no idea either.
No.
But yeah, It's a Wonderful... It also makes the intro difficult because I normally say it's blank, but when it's the movie is It's, I don't know if I should say It's a Wonderful Life or It's a Wonder... I feel like technically I should say It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
But it sounds... I don't like that.
That sounds bad.
So I just skipped it. Anyways, we have most of our segments, including a very short Guess Who. So we're going to jump right into it. If you have not watched It's a Wonderful Life recently or read the short story it's based on, here is a brief synopsis of both.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
Okay, this is my synopsis of The Greatest Gift by Philip Van Doren Stern. Still a hell of a name. On Christmas Eve, banker and family man George Pratt is standing on a bridge contemplating suicide when he's interrupted by a little man carrying a traveling salesman case saying very odd things. When George wishes that he had never been born, the man says his wish has been granted and vanishes. At first, George doesn't believe him, but then he makes his way into town where things keep happening that he can't explain. The bank that he works at is shuttered and listed as for sale, his parents don't recognize him at all, and his wife is married to someone else. Devastated, George returns to the bridge where the little man lectures him about denying the greatest gift and then restores his life back to him. George runs gleefully through town, rejoicing and wishing everyone a Merry Christmas. The end.
All right, and here is a brief synopsis on It's a Wonderful Life, sourced a lot of it from Wikipedia, but also my own stuff. So, on Christmas Eve, 1945, George Bailey contemplates suicide. The prayers of his family reach heaven, where the guardian angel Clarence Oddbody is assigned to save George and earn his wings. The greater angels then give Clarence a primer by showing him flashbacks of George's life to catch him up on George's situation. He sees the young George save his brother from drowning in an iced-over pond, but lose his hearing and his left ear in the process. He sees him stop the pharmacist whom he worked for from accidentally poisoning a customer. Jumping forward, he watches George plan to leave Bedford Falls and head to college and greater adventure before George is forced to stay in town and run his late father's building and loan business. He falls in love with and weds Mary. George is unable due to his hearing issues, but his younger brother Harry serves in World War II and becomes a war hero, earning the Medal of Honor. In the lead up to Christmas 1945, George's uncle Billy, who also works in the building and loan, misplaces $8,000 of the company's money, which was discovered by miserly Mr. Potter, who's been attempting to put the building and loan out of business for years, and thus so he didn't tell them that he found the money. And George realizes that he will soon go to jail on fraud embezzlement charges, and the company will go bankrupt. and everything is falling apart. After begging Potter for a loan, Potter tells him he's worth more dead than alive because of his life insurance policy, and George heads to the bridge to end his life and allow his family to cash in said life insurance. Now we're at the part of the film that people actually remember. Before he can jump, Clarence jumps in first, and George dives in to save him. Afterwards, George wishes he had never been born, and Clarence grants this wish, showing him a much different and darker, according to the movie's world, where George never existed. Realizing his mistake and his desire for life, George begs God for another chance, and it is granted. He rushes home to his family and is greeted by the entire town showing up to lend him his misplaced $8,000. George's company is saved, his appreciation for life is restored, and Clarence gets his wings. The end. That is a brief summary of It's a Wonderful Life. Katie, we have exactly one Guess Who, so let's do it.
Who are you?
No one of consequence.
I must know.
Get used to disappointment.
Okay?
He was stout, well past middle age, and his round cheeks were pink in the winter air as though they had just been shaved. He wore a moth-eaten old fur cap and a shabby overcoat that was stretched tightly over his paunchy belly.
Okay, I feel like there's only one character I think this could be, and that would be Clarence.
Yeah,
the
it is
angel,
Clarence,
or
yes.
whatever
Yeah,
the character, if it has a name.
The Clarence parallel character. Yes,
Does
it
it
is.
have a name in the?
No.
Okay, we'll get to it obviously right now. But I nailed it. Yeah, I figured it was probably like the main one. I thought there might be some other, but obviously I assumed that probably wasn't George. Or our main character, so I was like, okay, that's probably got to be Clarence, and it does actually fit the description or what we see in the film pretty closely.
Not too far off.
Not too far. All right, time to find out if all these things I have questions about were in the book.
Nicholas Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone.
The what?
Honestly, don't you two read?
So our story, as I laid out in the synopsis, kind of initially, is that the prayers are heard in heaven of George's family praying for him, and so heaven decides to send an angel down to take care of him, but they send a lesser angel, angel second class, which is George, who doesn't have his wings yet, and I wanted to know if that's a similar premise from the book, if the angel or whatever that comes to save George is trying to earn their wings or something like that.
So Clarence does have a parallel character in the book. You heard his description a moment ago. Some kind of mystical being that shows up and grants George's wish to have never been born. But it's never explicitly stated that he's an angel or a guardian angel. Nothing about wings. So
okay, so then that kind of answers my next question, which was that whether or not, because I forgot that in the film we fly up into outer space, and watch galaxies and nebulas chat with each other as physical representations of like celestial beings, which is a wild scene that I completely forgot about, and I wanted to know if any of that. Like maybe the book opens on in space and we're watching celestial bodies like have a conversation about George or something. I wanted to know if any of that came from the book or if Frank Capra or whoever wrote this just kind of like winged or came up with that one on their own.
So there is no like elaborate celestial backstory in the book. We meet the Clarence character, but we don't know who he is or where he comes from or if he works alone.
The mysterious stranger.
The mysterious stranger is indeed what he is. I had this change under better in the movie. And, neither of us are like particularly into religion in stories.
No.
I think that's safe to say.
It's pretty safe to say.
But the sequence of like space and the little blinking talking stars, I think is so interesting.
It is
And the movie is not like there's religion in it.
It's about as secular as a movie about an angel getting its wings could possibly be.
Yeah. and the thing that I like about this movie too is that it there is religion in it, but it's not a religious message.
It's not the point.
Yeah.
Really.
It's like at the end of it, the message is that he was a good man because he treated other people well.
Yeah.
And like humans, not, oh, he was a good Christian and
Yeah.
therefore he was a good man.
And that your life is worthwhile and worth living, and even when things seem, dark and terrible, that they're that life is still worthwhile. And that's obviously a very complicated, nuanced discussion that we're not going to get into the whole depths of that. But like as a broad message, that idea of like hope and not giving in to despair or whatever is like broadly, again, a good message and like an agreeable message. And you're right. It has a very secular message despite being
like
a movie
despite
where,
having elements of religion.
where an angel shows up and saves a man's life and he begs God for another chance. None of it feels like, again, it's sort of, those are all like elements of the point of the story, but they're not the main thrust of what this movie is trying to say, which is like, the movie is not remotely trying to say like, believe in God, trust in God, believe in angels, trust it. Like none of that is the point of this movie. It's just what is happening. It's like the framework of how this story moves. But the whole point of the story, like you said, is very grounded in earthly humanity and how people treat other people, and how our one life that we have is a thing worth, cherishing or that kind of thing. So yeah, I would agree completely that I was pleasantly surprised from not remembering anything about this movie other than a few lines and the the last 20 minutes of the movie.
Yeah.
In my head, this was a much more religious movie than it is, and it's not like at all.
Yeah.
It was really interesting. So as we flash back and they're showing Clarence George's life, which is the vast majority of this movie, is basically a flashback. This movie is like 90% flashback, basically. Like the whole first hour and 40 minutes of it, and then the very end is like current time, Christmas. Now let's do this. But we get this flashback to George as a kid. And there's this one, he works in the pharmacy shop, and he's talking to Mary, a young Mary who's in there, and Violet, I believe, is also there. But he's talking to Mary, and he's talking about how he wants to go on adventures. He's like, I'm going to get out of this town. I'm going to go on adventures, and I'm going to have harems, lots of harems, and so many wives or something. And I was like, what is happening? And I wanted to know if any of that came from the book, because I was not prepared for this little like 8-year-old to be talking about all the harems he was gonna have. I was like, what is going on?
So I think I missed that line. I must have been writing a note when you said that, because I don't remember that. So in the book, adult George does like allude to his life being kind of like a boring dead end. So I guess you could say that perhaps at one time he longed for adventure.
Okay.
But there's not a point made of it. And there's nothing about harems.
Okay. So my guess what the movie is going for here is, one, it's the idea is that it's kind of silly, like hearing a little kid talk about this thing that he maybe doesn't even really understand.
Yeah, probably doesn't understand.
But like probably he probably reads, read a book or was listening to a radio show or something.
Yeah, he probably read like Arabian Nights or something.
Yeah, something where harems were mentioned and having multiple wives was mentioned or something like that, and he just kind of like repeated it. But it was like, what is okay? All right, great. So like I said, he works at the pharmacist. And while he's there, the guy who owns it, Mr. I can't remember his name, this old man who is the pharmacist, he got a telegram earlier the day that his adult son, or his son, I assume adult son, because this guy's like in his 70s or something, died of the flu.
Yeah.
And so he's like completely broken up and distraught over this, and he's trying to fill a prescription, and he accidentally fills it with poison, and George notices and is able to doesn't deliver the drugs like the guy tells him to. So he keeps and then later tells him, like, I think you put poison in these, after the pharmacist beats him up for like a minute or two for talking back to him or whatever. The labor laws were just wild back in the day. Just one is like an 8-year-old working at a pharmacy, but two, you just beat him if you want. It was like, oh boy.
Box his ears.
Yeah. But I wanted to know if any of that with the saving the people from being poisoned from the pharmacy, from the distraught pharmacist, came from the book.
None of that is in the book. It is better in the movie. I love this whole plot point. It's so dramatic. I love it. I also love how there's a big glass jar just labeled poison.
So I think because I also laughed at that. I think it's the back of the jar says poison and the front has like an actual label. It's still very funny though.
It's just like in huge
Yeah.
letters.
It just says poison. And then my favorite thing is after he tells the pharmacist figures out if this is true or not by tasting said. He like kicks and licks it and is like, oh, that is poison. And now I get the idea of like it's not consuming enough for it to matter.
Yeah.
Blah blah blah. But it's just very funny to me. He's like, let's find out if this is a deadly poison or not. I'll just put a little on my tongue. Great.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So we jump forward then quite a bit into his college years, post high school, or pre-college years in that time frame in George's life, and his younger brother Harry is graduating from high school, and they're having a big party, like a graduation party dance thing, and they go to this big dance, and George shows up as well. Because he's in town or whatever, and it takes place in this gymnasium. We talked about this in a prequel, but it's a very famous. It's been in several movies, and it's still apparently functioning and works at like the Beverly Hills High School or whatever it is, which is they have a giant gym floor over the top of a swimming pool that is like mechanically operated and can open up. And in this scene, they're dancing. He's dancing with Mary, and Sam, who is another boy who likes her, is jealous that they're dancing together, and so he opens the floor to like humiliate them, and they fall in. But then everybody's like, "Oh, that looks like so much fun!" And everybody jumps in. It's this big thing, and I want to know if any of that came from the book.
None of that is from the book. Again, I'm calling this one better in the movie. This is a great scene.
Okay. I do the moment where they're dancing back and forth without like oblivious and everybody else because it's so loud and they can't hear and everybody's screaming and he's like, we must be doing great or whatever. It's fun. It's a fun scene.
It's a fun scene. I like all the old men that I guess are like the chaperones and teachers or whatever are like, what do we do? And then one of them's like, who cares? And dives in.
And just jumps in. He's like, screw it. Yeah, it's great. It's great. It's a fun scene. It is absolutely a fun little scene that, again, it's like I have so many notes about this. Like so much of this movie, I only remember the final 20 minutes of this movie.
Yeah.
You gun to my head, I never would have been able to tell you any of this other stuff happens. That this movie is basically just like a biopic of George Bailey until the very end of the movie. So then we move forward even a little bit more. And this, I believe, is right after. This is right after George's dad passes away, who owned and ran the building and loan in town, which was a company who like owned or like a lot of the mortgages and stuff for a lot of the people who owned or rented houses in town or something like that. Basically, they loaned money or helped. Again,
like they helped people build housing.
Yes, but I think essentially I don't know what a building and loan exactly is, but it sounded to me like, and they were very forgiving with like people paying them back. They were very like lax about if people were late on payments and blah, blah, blah. They weren't, very ruthless about it or whatever. And they built good properties and whatever. Again, it's a complicated thing, but after his father passes away, this is when Mr. Potter, who's the rich miserly old man who owns the entire town, basically, other than all the stuff that the building and loan owns essentially. And he's trying to come in and shut down the building and loan so that he can basically completely run the town. And during this board meeting, he's trying to dissolve the company or whatever. And George gets up and has this big speech to him. And it's just a great speech. But in particular, this line stuck out to me towards the end of it. And I want to know if any of this came from the book. He says specifically these lines, but any of this aspect of like the story says, just remember this, Mr. Potter, that this rabble you're talking about, they do most of the working and paying and living and dying in this community. Well, is it too much to have them work and pay and live and die in a couple of decent rooms and a bath? Anyway, my father didn't think so. People were human beings to him, but to you, a warped, frustrated old man to their cattle. Well, in my book, my father died a much richer man than you'll ever be. It's great, and it keeps going, and he goes off on this guy about being a shitty old capitalist, and I wanted to know, like I said, if any of that comes from the book.
It does not. I regret to say that the book is far less based
Yeah.
than the movie.
Well, and it's funny, we did talk about in the prequel about how the FBI was like came out and was like, this movie is communist propaganda, and it's like, not really, but I can see what you're saying, that this movie, and it is so funny that I bet if you went and polled 1 billion, if you went and polled all of the most right-wing conservative like boomers in this country about like what their favorite Christmas movie was,
Mm-hmm.
God, so many of them, it has to be It's a Wonderful Life, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like it has to be. Maybe a few will say like Miracle on 34th Street, but so many of them are going to say It's a Wonderful Life. And this whole movie's whole premise is similar to Christmas Carol, but this is the whole premise. The whole point of this movie is like, don't be a capitalist pig. All right. Like that's all. It's like, hey, respect people, laborers unite. Like this is all like working class unite, eat the rich. It's like, how do you watch these movies and hold the politics you hold? I don't understand it. It's wild. It's so wild. And like I said, this movie spends just an absurdly long time setting up George's backstory, and I wanted to know if the book did any of this. This would have basically undercut all of my other questions if I would have been like, hey, any of the stuff where we see George's whole life before he attempts suicide, is that in the book? It would have just undercut everything. So I didn't ask it that way, but now I'm kind of asking if any of that stuff comes from the book.
So the book is not structured similarly to the movie. The book is basically just the part where he's never been born and is running around freaking out.
Okay.
And we do
so
learn
the last 15 minutes.
Yes, we do learn a little bit about his backstory during that portion, like just enough to understand what's been changed by him not being born, but it's a different setup.
Right. It's not a different setup. It's just, well, I guess it depends on what you mean by setup. It's the same. It's literally just, we just don't get all of the backstory or as in depth of the backstory. But I mean, because the setup is essentially identical. It's the execution of, whatever. I guess mincing hairs at that point. There's a scene later after eventually he meets back up with Mary as adults, and they have a very brief courtship, and then they get married. And they're getting ready to go on their honeymoon, and there's this great scene where they're leaving, and then there's a run on the bank, which for most, go Google. I'm not explaining what a run on the bank is. It's basically the idea is just like, it's basically, I think, kind of what happened to FTX. The guy who just got Bankman-Fried or whatever, or the crypto guy who just got arrested. I think it's essentially a similar idea where like a run on the bank is like everybody comes, wants all their money back.
Yeah, but the money's not there because that's not how banks work.
Well, in this sense, in the run on the bank sense, I actually think it is. Like I think it is the fact that the money is kind of somewhat there. Kind of, and that's what why there can be a run on the bank. You literally can't have a run on the bank anymore because of how banks operate, I think. But I think back in the day, it was at least the reason it happened was because everybody could go get their money to some extent. Not everybody. It's complicated. But anyways, I'm not a financial person. Anyways, go look up what a run on the bank is. But there's a run on the bank. Basically, everybody shows up and wants their money back. And then somehow this trickles into George. I don't understand finance or economic stuff enough to understand why this then impacts George's issue or George's company.
Okay, I'm gonna speak out of my butt because I'm not a financial person either. So I think what he basically has going on with his business is kind of like a credit union.
Yeah, that does seem
more than like a bank.
It does seem like kind of what's going on.
It seems like people bring their money there and he like helps them with mortgages and stuff like that. So everybody's kind of putting their money into one pot. Right. And so he literally doesn't have the money.
Yes.
Because he's not a bank.
Right.
So I think what is supposed to have happened here is that there's a run on the bank in town and everybody's panicking.
So other people
other people panic, so they all go, well, I'm going to go get my money too.
Yeah. I assume that is what's going on here. It's just, So anyway, again, it's a thing that happened back in the day that doesn't really, it happens differently now. Again, I'm pretty sure that's basically what happened to FTX, I think, essentially, and why that went tits up. But but they're like, oh, well, the people are like, hey, we need our money. And he's like, well, I'll get you your money, in 60 days. We'll dole out the money. But then they're like, we need money now, blah, blah, blah. And I guess part of the idea is that they can't get the money out of the bank, so that they need money from him because their money from the bank is gone. I don't know. But they basically end up using all of their money from that they were going to spend on their honeymoon. They had like $2,000 saved up for their honeymoon. And instead of using it on the honeymoon, they pay it all out to all the people that were there to help them cover their expenses for the coming weeks. And then they get, as he's leaving, they're all very excited that they were able to do it. They paid everybody out what they needed and still have like $2 left. But then his cab driver takes him home that night because he's like, oh, shoot, where's Mary? I'm supposed to be going on my honeymoon. And he arrives at the house. The cab driver takes him to this house that they looked at earlier, which was his old ramshackle, rundown house that Mary was like in love with and wanted. And there's a sign on the door that says bridal suite or whatever, or honeymoon suite. And he goes in, and Mary has like created a little like made dinner and has like chickens roasting by the fire. And there's like a honeymoon suite bedroom.
A love nest, if you will.
It's very sweet. And they're put up like posters of like foreign places on the windows or whatever. And I wanted to know if any of that scene, any element of that came from the book, because I was like, you got yourself a real one there with Mary. She's a winner. Good job, George.
None of that is from the book. George works at a bank. There's nothing about the building a loan. There's no run on the bank. It is mentioned that Mary's parents bought them a house, but nothing else about the house.
Okay, fair enough. So none of that comes from the book.
Yeah.
Also, like I said, I forgot how much of this movie is just George's life. But not only that, like none of the like first hour 40 of this movie has anything to do with Christmas. Like none of it takes place during Christmas or around Christmas. So much of this movie just is aggressively not a Christmas movie in any way whatsoever, except for, again, the final 20 minutes. And I wanted to know if the book was similar in any capacity.
Again, the book is only the part where he hasn't been born, so
which does take place on Christmas.
There's not a huge chunk of non-Christmas backstory.
Right.
The part of the book that is in the movie, the part of the movie that is from the book, in the book it similarly takes place on Christmas Eve.
Okay.
But it's also not like, I don't know, like he wishes people a Merry Christmas, but Christmas isn't like a plot element.
It's not a plot element,
I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and it's not really in the book or in the film, again, other than like everybody coming together at the end in sort of like the giving spirit of the holiday, I guess, kind of.
Yeah.
But you could see this taking place literally any time. Like, the story could, like, the final part of the story could take place.
Yeah, like, theoretically it could.
Anytime. It doesn't really matter at all. The only thing that kind of matters is we have a Christmas tree with a bell on it that can ring.
Right. Well, and
for our final line.
It ties into themes, like Christmassy themes, like goodwill and compassion and generosity.
Yeah, but I think the people all come together. I guess what I'm saying is that the people all come together to support George and give him money and stuff, not because it's Christmas and like in the Christmas spirit. It ties into that idea, but the reason they do it is because he's a good guy who has always helped them out.
No, yeah, you're absolutely right.
So like it could happen when, you know what I mean? Like it's not pivotal that it happens at Christmas because, again, the people, I think if this was the middle of like August or whatever, if they found out George Bailey needed help, they would all still show up and give him, you know what I mean? So I guess that's kind of what I'm saying, is that it doesn't actually really matter that it's Christmas.
No, it doesn't. Which
is, I thought, was interesting. But yes, you're right. That the themes do tie into kind of general, broader Christmas themes that we tend to see in media. So we get this line. I just had to ask if this came from the book because I didn't know. I'd never heard this, and I had to look it up. He's talking to George, or George is talking to Mr. Potter at one point, and Mr. Potter says to him, "Don't you ever get tired of playing nursemaid to a bunch of garlic eaters?" And I was like, "What in the world does that mean?" And then I was like, wait a second, was that like a slam on Italian people? Is that like a derogatory term for Italian people? And I looked it up and it absolutely is. It was an early 20th century slur, not really, I don't know, term, kind of slur for it said generally European people, but specifically Italian people, garlic eaters. And I was like, oh, okay, that's weird.
It's a little weird.
It's real weird.
It's not from the book. It's kind of an interesting historical tidbit.
Yeah.
I mean, Italian people, Italian immigrants had their turn at being the undesirable
yes,
group.
absolutely. It's just very funny to me. As insults, I mean, I get it. Insults are always very stupid and stuff like that. But like, it's just like, garlic is delicious. Like, why would you make that your thing? Everybody eats garlic because it's great. It's delicious. What are you talking about? So I wanted to know if the thing that kicks off the chain of events that leads to George's potential or contemplation of ending his life is kicked off by his Uncle Billy just being an absolute idiot and losing $8,000 because he blows it in the movie. And the whole idea with his characters, he's kind of like,
he's a lovable
goof, like a lovable idiot or whatever. But man, he's holding an envelope full of $8,000 and then just stuffs it into a newspaper without realizing. It's like, come on, man. Come on. It's not even like a reasonable, like, oh, I could see how you'd make that mistake necessarily. It's like, you're just an idiot.
If I had an envelope with $8,000 in cash in it, I would feel like I was carrying a bomb.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, it's just, and again, I get the idea is he makes this deposit pretty regularly. It's like, it's a routine thing. And he goes and deposits a big chunk of change every, month or whatever. But it's still just very like, what is happening? And I wanted to know if that is what leads to the potential collapse that is causing George's life to spin out of control.
No, that's not from the book.
Do we know what is the thing that?
Yeah, I have more notes on it.
Okay,
later,
that's fine. We can get to it later.
But yeah.
Okay. I also wanted to know, he then, after he realizes that everything's going very poorly and he needs money quickly or else because again, the reason this happens in the movie is that what is the term? A
bank examiner?
A bank examiner shows up to like look through the books.
Yeah.
And he realizes that he's gonna be like, wow, we're $8,000 short. He's gonna think we're like embezzling money or whatever. And so he goes to Mr. Potter to try to get a loan because he knows Mr. Potter's like the only guy in town who could,
Yeah, he's the only one who's good for it.
Yeah, who would have $8,000 to loan him. So he goes to beg him for this loan. And Mr. Potter obviously he knows about the money missing and all this has been his plan to force them out of business all along. So he's not into it, but he does tell him at one point that he's worth more dead than alive because of his insurance policy. And this kind of triggers in George's mind, like, oh, you're right. And he kind of realizes like a potential out for this situation. I want to know if that line came from the book or if there's a villain like Mr. Potter who puts the idea of killing himself into George's mind.
No and no.
Okay.
Also, I thought you didn't get a payout if you
generally, I think in I don't know if it's always been the case.
Fair enough.
I don't know if that's always been the case, but yes, generally in modern life insurance policies, if it's ruled like a suicide, it also I think depends on the insurance policy, but generally speaking, yes, like anything that is found to be a suicide, they will not pay.
Yeah.
Again, I think generally, I'm sure there are exceptions and stuff, but it also may not have always been the case. And also, I think part of the idea is that he may not have been thinking, he may not have known that at the time. Like, even if it was the case at the time, he may not have known that. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know how that worked out, but that is true now for the most part. And then, so getting to the actual final, the part of the movie that, like I said, that everybody remembers, is he going to go jump off a bridge and then an angel just shows up?
So the book opens with him standing like on the edge of the bridge when the angel Clarence parallel character shows up. That character does not jump into the river.
Oh, yeah, because in the book or in the film, Clarence jumps in. And then I thought this was very funny. I'm like, well, if it's not that far, because Clarence falls in or jumps in and then George just dives in after him. Like, oh, so it's not that, like, you could have probably survived. Like, you probably.
Well, they both do. I feel like realistically, they both might have drowned.
Or they both would have drowned. Yeah. Like,
Because it was moving at a pretty, like, it was churning.
It was choppy and it was cold.
Yeah.
Like, very cold
and
water.
we don't know how deep it is or how fast the
or
current's
anything
moving.
like we don't know anything like that. But it does. So yeah, it either seems like one, he wouldn't have died from jumping in to begin with, unless again the idea is like he was just gonna. Obviously, also there's, just to clarify, there's a difference between diving in intentionally, like he dives in like with good form in a way where, because if you just fall on water is very different than landing intentionally in water that you're trying to like not hurt yourself landing in. So there's that. But even still, I feel like either he would have just not died had he jumped in on his own, or they both would have died when he jumped in to try to save Clarence. And it's just like the movie is kind of hand waves away because it's not really that important. But I thought that was kind of funny. I'm like, oh, you're just gonna jump in? I thought that was the whole thing we didn't want you to do, was to jump. Okay, all right, I guess you'll be fine. Cool. And yeah, again, I get the idea is like maybe even if he would have jumped in, one, he would have landed bad and hurt himself, but also he maybe just like let himself drown or something. I don't know. It's not really important, but I just thought it was kind of funny. So then the big thing, this is the how the message in the film is delivered. He asks Clarence, or he doesn't ask Clarence, he says, "I wish I'd never been born." And Clarence is like, that's a good idea. Maybe that'll do the trick. And then switches the world to a world where George had never been born. And that's the big alternate reality message delivery system, is a universe where George doesn't exist, to show him how bad things could be without him. And I want to know if that's the twist in the book.
Yeah, that is the main plot of the book. Clarence does not accompany him through the town in the book, but that is basically what happens.
Gotcha. And then does George run through town seeing all of the degenerate trash, i.e. bars and casinos and risque clubs or whatever?
He does not. That scene has always cracked me up. He's just like running down the main drag, and it's like bar, dancers, casino, bar, dancers, casino, pawn shop.
It is essentially turned into Las Vegas, basically. Yeah.
I'm like, how is this town supporting all of these very similar businesses?
Yeah, there's a lot of the same.
You guys don't need 20 bars.
Yeah. Yeah, and I will say that's the most conservative thing about this movie is it's like, look at how horrible the world is. There's bars and women. I don't know. Like it's this is very funny. That's the most accurate cop scene in a movie ever. He walks at this shit cracked me up so much. He walks out, he's like, again, he's freaking out because he doesn't know what's going on, and he gets into town, he's trying to find, he runs into Violet or somebody. And I don't remember where he is, but he's leaving some building, and a cop tries the like single cop that we see throughout the movie tries to stop. Bert, I think is his name, tries to stop him, and he punches him in the face and then runs away. And as he's running away, the cop pulls out his gun and just starts shooting at him. Just an unarmed man running away. He just starts firing willy-nilly at him with people walking around everywhere. And I was like, this is the most accurate cop scene I've ever had seen in a movie. And I want to know if any of that came from the book.
It does not. There's not a cop character in the book at all. So
dang. that scene got me good. So eventually he realizes, the world's a disaster without me, and he goes back to the bridge to pray and beg for his life back or whatever, and God or the angels or whatever grant him his life back, and he goes home, and as he's running home, he's looking and seeing all the businesses that are back now that he remembers, and he's running down Main Street, and it's a very famous shot in the film, and he's like saying hello to all the businesses, and I wanted to know if that where he yells Merry Christmas to all the businesses came from the book, because it's like the main reason this movie's a Christmas movie.
I would say no. He does run back to like the places and people that he visited while he didn't exist.
Okay.
And wishes everyone a Merry Christmas.
Okay, so the idea is...
The idea is there, but like that specific scene where he's running down the street yelling Merry Christmas to all the businesses is not from the book.
Okay, fair enough. And then does Mary end up saving the day? Because in the film, it just turns out Mary has been... solving this problem while he's been sulking on a bridge. She went around and talked to everybody, and they all show up to drop all the money off. And somebody says like, "Mary did this. Good job, Mary." And she's kind of like shuffles off to the side. I want to know if there's a similar like resolution to like the town showing up to like give him money or save the day. How does that wrap up in the book?
The missing money plotline is not from the book.
Okay.
So there's not really a resolution at the end other than like him realizing he does want to be alive, and
Right.
he like goes back home and kisses his wife and children, and everything's great.
So the reason he's suicidal in the book has less to do with like a big catastrophic event.
Yes.
Okay. All right. We're gonna talk about
We're
it.
gonna
Okay.
talk
Okay.
about
Okay. Okay. Well, then my last question, and obviously has to be the last question. Is this line from the book? Every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings. That's right. Well, Jimmy Stewart. That's right. I can't do Jimmy Stewart, but does that line? Every time every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings. Does that come from the book?
I thought for sure this would be from the book.
I mean, surely.
But it's not. It's totally a movie invention.
Well, there you go. So that I would have assumed that and well, I guess that makes sense. I guess I should have known because I did start by asking if the whole angel wings getting his wings plot line came from the book, and it did not. So it makes sense that the line wouldn't. But yeah, that's something else because that's it's got to be like top 5 or 10 like known lines of cinema.
Yeah.
Like at least English speaking, like Western cinema. It's pretty crazy. All right. Well, those are all the questions I had. I didn't have a Lost in adaptation because it wasn't really too confused by anything. But it's time now to find out what Katie thought was better in the book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
I just have a couple things here. My first two are things that were added to the movie that are not in the book. And I just want to preface this by saying that obviously the way that we perceive things as an audience changes over time. So this is just a couple things that are a little uncomfortable as a modern audience watching it. Like the part where he won't give her robe back is a little uncomfortable.
It's borders on the edge. Yeah, for sure. It definitely leans into like, okay, yeah, into gross.
And then like the part like when they get together and they're talking on the phone together to Sam, and then he starts like shaking her and yelling in her face.
It's really weird.
It's just uncomfortable to watch.
That one's just one of those things where it's like, is this how people displayed emotion and like,
or is it like a character choice? I don't know.
I had the same thing in that moment where, because the specific moment you're talking about, just to clarify for in the listeners if they haven't watched the movie in a while, is right when he like realizes he loves her or whatever, and is gonna like he's going to her house, and then they get a phone call from Sam, and they're like listening to the phone on the phone together because Sam wants to talk to him for some reason about something. And then they're kind of like their heads are leaned together. And then after they hang up the phone, he turns to her, and they're like, he's like resisting. I think the idea of what we're supposed to be playing out in the scene is he's like realizing and resisting the fact that he's like in love with her or whatever. But the way it plays out physically in the scene is he like awkwardly grabs her and is kind of yelling at her.
Yeah, he's like kind of shaking her. He's like 2 inches away from her face, yelling.
Yeah,
that he doesn't want to get married and settle down and blah blah blah. So I do think that what we're supposed to be seeing is him resisting.
Yeah, this is him like resisting
this idea of like domesticity, I guess.
Yeah, and abandoning his life of adventure or whatever, and that sort of thing. But it could just come across weird. Like the other scene with the sweater thing or with the robe, it's like that I could see still playing in a movie today. It would be it's awkward, and it looks like, or not awkward, it's creepy, and it's definitely like, without seeing enough of their relationship to know like the back and forth they have, it comes across as like bad. Like
Yeah.
it comes across as like that. Don't do that. So, but you can see what the movie's doing there. In this scene, I was just like, is this how humans express feelings? And like, what? It just feels so weird. And then the way they and this is the thing with old movies in general, they kiss like psychopaths. Like it, in the 40s and 50s, I don't know if it was in like pre 70s or 60s or so. Everybody just kisses insanely,
Like so aggressive.
and like. And I don't know if that was a movie only thing or if people actually kissed that way, but I don't know.
Couldn't tell
But
ya.
they just like aggressively smash their faces into each other in a way that is, and I part of that may be like a ratings thing, maybe like,
yeah, maybe.
like the actual like making out was like obscene or something. I don't know, but the way that people kiss in old movies has always just been very upsetting to me. I'm just like, what is this? What are you doing? And again, maybe it's a ratings thing, maybe it's just a change in whatever cultural mores or whatever. But it's just very strange to me. But yeah, that whole scene, I agree. It just, again, almost less so than like it being problematic or weird. I just felt like it was like, who acts like, what is happening?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah, it's an
strange.
odd scene. It's a little uncomfortable to watch, as
Yeah.
I said. A couple other things here. In the short story, the Clarence parallel character gives him like a traveling salesman case. After he grants his wish to have never been born, he's like, here, take this. And you can like use that as a way to talk to people. And he does, like, he goes to his parents' house and he uses that as like a way to basically like get inside and talk to them. And then he does the same thing with his wife, who's not his wife. And I don't think that would have worked in this movie. And I think that the way it plays out with him just like running around freaking out is better. But I did think it was kind of a charming, interesting little device in the short story.
Yeah, no, it sound yeah.
Yeah. And he like when he goes to talk to his wife, he's like, "Oh, here, take this brush. We're giving them away for free on Christmas. It's a sample, blah blah blah." And then like when he comes back at the end after he's gotten his life back, the brush is still there. Dun dun dun.
That's a fun little
Yeah, like it's a
detail,
fun
yeah.
little like twist.
Like a
kind
little
of.
like it's a fun little like a Twilight Zone little
Yeah.
detail. Like, ooh, yeah, no, that's fun.
And my last note is about Mary, because the worst fate that that the movie can think of for Mary
So
is
good.
being a spinster librarian.
She's an old maid.
But in the book, she's married to a mean drunk, and I think that's worse.
No, that's way worse.
Worse.
That's her life seems fine in the movie. She's just like works at a library, like seems pretty chill, like it seems fine. And then,
but she wears glasses,
and they made her homely.
and she's dowdy.
Yeah. Yeah, and then no, definitely being married to like a mean drunk would be a fate much worse than being a nice librarian, as it turns out. Yeah, that cracked me up. I was just like, oh no, because he grabs her and he's like, Mary, what happened to you? You're a librarian. No. Like, okay, great. All right, let's find out what Katie thought was better in the movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
So right off the bat, the movie changes George's last name from Pratt to Bailey. I think that was a good choice.
Yes.
Bailey is a far friendlier sounding
Much friendlier name than Pratt.
Yeah.
And as before recent events with certain people named Pratt. But yeah.
So his younger brother, Harry, it is established in the book that he did have a younger brother who he saved from drowning. And then when he's never been born, obviously his brother did drown.
Yeah.
But they say that it happened like at a lake in the summer. And I think the like sledding and the frozen lake scene is so much more dramatic.
Yeah. No, it's great. Yeah, I agree. Moving it to the winter and iced over lakes are just always much creepier.
Yeah.
Scarier than just a regular lake.
And every time I watch this movie, I'm like, why were they Why they should have known not to go on that ice.
Kids are stupid.
They're very stupid because it wasn't.
I think the idea
like,
is also he
wasn't
slid
like,
further than
Well, he
like they
slid
knew the
further.
ice was thin over there, but they didn't.
No, but it was already open.
Oh, yeah.
Like he didn't like crack it and fall through. There was just like an open part.
Yeah.
And like no.
Yeah.
You could not have paid me enough.
Kids are very stupid.
I liked that the movie built his relationship with Mary over the years. It's not a huge focus in the short story, I guess, so maybe it doesn't really matter, but I liked it.
Yeah.
I liked that the movie gave us a central villain in Mr. Potter,
Mm-hmm.
continuing the glorious tradition of anti-capitalist Christmas films
Yeah.
and stories.
Yeah.
I love every single interaction that Mary has with her mother. And like every time we see her mom, she always looks so upset.
Yeah, she really
about
does.
The fact that they got married. And I love this one particular line when he goes over to her house. This is right before the like shaking and yelling scene that we were just talking about. And he's in their like parlor or whatever. And her mother yells down from upstairs. She's like, "Who's that?" And it's like, "Well, it's George Bailey." "Well, what's he doing here?" And Mary's like, "He's making violent love to me, mother."
Yeah. And her mom's like, "Huh?"
A nice little moment of mother-daughter interaction there that feels very real.
Yeah.
I like how this movie is technically like a period piece, kind of, but it's just kind of sitting in that. It feels very natural. Like there's nobody's ever like, "Oh no, the depression."
Yeah, you're right, because
you
most
just see the effects of it.
Yeah, because most of this takes place in like the 20s.
Yeah,
and then the
like
40s,
the 20s
eventually.
and 30s, and then we like the World War II feels a little different because it's like a montage.
Yeah,
where they explain everything that happened. But like the Great Depression, and then like even like when we see the pharmacist's son who died of influenza, that's like 1918.
Oh yeah.
So that's like
that's
Spanish
like
flu.
the Spanish
like
flu, yeah.
But nobody's like, the Spanish
right,
flu.
Yeah, it's never like
we just
specifically
see the effect of it.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of Forrest Gump. It's like inverse Forrest Gump, where we just kind of see the effects of the world events that are happening and we never point them out or draw attention to them, whereas Forrest Gump is like the exact opposite of every possible way. That's really funny.
So I want to talk about the reason that the main character, George, is feeling suicidal in both of these mediums. So I'll read to you what he says in the short story. So he's talking with the Clarence character. The little man made a queer chuckling sound. Come, it can't be that bad. You've got your job at the bank, and Mary and the kids. You're healthy, young, and sick of everything, George cried. I'm stuck here in this mud hole for life, doing the same dull work day after day. Other men are leading exciting lives, but I'm just a small-town bank clerk that the army didn't even want. I never did anything really useful or interesting, and it looks as if I never will. I might as well just be dead. I might be better dead. Sometimes I wish I were. And we've established that in the movie there was like this catastrophic thing.
In the movie, he's dealing with all of those same emotions.
Yeah.
But then there is this big moment where he realized where his business is going to go under, he's potentially going to go to jail. He thinks, all of these bad things all happen at once. And we kind of get like this big inflection point. Yeah. That is all on top of the fact that he feels that way about his life in general.
Right. And I just think like, and I don't want to imply that you need like a big catastrophic, like legitimate reason to feel suicidal,
no,
because I don't that's not the
how
case,
that works
and I
all.
don't feel like that's true. I do think that what the movie does feels more narratively satisfying.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think it definitely feels, it makes it just feels like, again, because all of those elements of what he's going through in the book are there, it just then takes it one step further and adds a more pointed hopelessness to him that makes it more obvious for audiences, especially given the context of, because it's one thing to depict like the I think you can do a very interesting and pointed sort of exploration of like suicidal ideation or suicidality and that sort of thing, where you are looking at it from the perspective of like the mundanity of it and how for lots of people it is not some big catastrophic event. But I think what you're trying to, at least what it seems like to me, what you're trying to say is that it doesn't really feel like the book either has enough time or cares to get into, or it's not really doing that. It's not doing this thing of like exploring depression, and
it comes across as shallow in the book, and it like lacking that depth that would be there.
Because the book is not a deep exploration of depression and and general malaise or whatever. It's not going in depth about like the point of the book is not like let's explore the mundanity of depression and how suicide can affect anyone, and it's not like, you know, this big event necessarily that leads to people considering that option or whatever. That's not what the book's about. The book's like, oh, look, life is worth living. It's very shallow surface level thing.
Yes.
And so if you're going to still keep it kind of shallow surface level, which the movie kind of does, at least giving this big catastrophic event that transpires makes it feel more believable. Maybe believable is not the right term, but it just feels like it works better potentially for the narrative.
Yeah. Well, and I think in the movie it helps too that we do see like basically his entire life, and we see him feeling trapped and dissatisfied at various points.
Yeah,
and then we get like this kind of big like flashpoint. And it feels a lot more like I said, like narratively satisfying, and it feels like it has more depth than what's going on in the short story.
Yeah, for sure.
I love that in the alternate universe of George Bailey not existing, Mr. Potter has just gone like full villain and renames the town after himself.
Yeah.
I love that.
Pottersville. It's great.
Why not?
Why
if
not?
You own the town.
Yeah.
So the first big thing in the book that tips George off that things are not right is that he walks past the bank where he works, and it's like shuttered and closed down, and there's like a for sale sign on it. And in the movie, the first big thing is them going to the bar and like him trying to interact with Nick at the bar and like slowly realizing that something is not right.
Yeah.
And I think that scene in the movie is far more unsettling than what we get in the book.
Okay.
Also, the movie just like offhand mentions that Uncle Billy went to the insane asylum. That's dark.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's super
It's like, oh,
dark.
by the way, he's been in the asylum for years. Like, oh, okay. Oof.
And I also, you know, I really prefer the ending of the film, because like I said, the short story, it's nice. You know, he gains a new appreciation for his life. He goes home, he kisses his wife and kids, everything's great. But I think the movie really does a lot with the themes about like compassion and goodwill. And you know, we have a protagonist who has spent his entire life treating everyone around him like a human being. And then at the end, that literally pays off.
Yeah. Yeah, his
It's
compassion
nice.
pays off. Yeah. No, it is. Absolutely. I would agree with that. All right, we're going to talk about a few things that the movie nailed.
As I expected, practically perfect in every way.
Not very much. Most of it is generally different enough for me to not include. But the scene where he's standing on the bridge in the dark and like snow's falling and he's looking down at the churning black water, that's how the short story opens, pretty much the same. And then when he's like, I wish I'd never been born, and his wish just gets granted, same. And then this one surprised me because I had forgotten that this was in the movie. He crashes his car into the tree.
Yeah.
And then when he goes back,
after the wish.
yeah,
Yeah.
the car's not there, and there's also like not like a gash or any kind of evidence in the tree. And the gash in the tree is from the short story.
Well,
It was like an accident that he had gotten into like earlier,
okay.
like months before,
Yeah.
and then as he's like walking home from the bridge, like before he's fully realized that
It's like that's
Yeah.
kind of like the first hint, then I guess.
kind of like he sees the tree and he like looks and he sees that the gash that he made is not
Yeah.
there, and he's like, that's weird.
That's weird, yeah. Huh. That's cool. All right. We have a handful of odds and ends before we get to the final verdict.
Oh, I love a good opening credits sequence. This movie has it because it's an old movie.
Yes. Yeah, it's like a book.
Yeah.
They literally turning pages on the book.
I think we should bring back opening credits sequences.
I could not disagree. We're going to have to get divorced. I could not disagree more.
I like when they're fun. I like them.
There's very few of them that I enjoy. 99% of the time, I get opening credits out of here. No, thank you. Just get to the film, please. There's this when he's a little kid. There's this great scene, and I love this character. She's fantastic throughout the whole film. She shows up like a handful of times, but Violet is the other girl that has a crush on George throughout the course of the film. And her and Mary are in the pharmacy at the beginning talking to each other. And Violet says to Mary, she's like, I like him about George, as he's like working over behind the counter. And Mary turns to her and says, you like every boy. And she's like, what's wrong with that? And I was like, good for you, Violet. We stand a sex positive queen. Look at you. It's great.
There's something that George's father says about Mr. Potter that I am incorporating into my vocabulary post haste. He says, like, he's a sick old man, sick in his body, and sick in his soul if he has one.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Which he does not.
I also love, and this goes back to my note earlier about the way that this movie handles the historical period that it's set in. But during the dance scene, it says like class of 1928. So like the whole time that there's this crowd of like dancing young people enjoying themselves, their lives are like about to begin. You just see 1928 hanging ominously
over their
heads.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Totally. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't even put that together, but that's fantastic.
I also loved to bring this movie into modernity. Mr. Potter, when they're talking after George's dad dies and they're talking about he's trying to like dissolve the building and loan.
Yeah.
And he has this whole big long speech about the people in the town that basically just boils down to nobody wants to work anymore.
Yep.
Boy, we just keep saying the same things, don't we?
The more things change, the more they stay the same. Yeah, people have been complaining about people being lazy and entitled for literally all of human history. It's just never not been a thing. And we kind of talked about it, but it is just so much of this movie is just so deeply sad. It's like watching this out of context as like a Christmas movie. If you don't watch it as a Christmas movie, like if you're just watching it as a movie, it's just like a deeply sad and tragic film where where he just like gets steamrolled into wasting away his life working at his dad's job that he didn't want to do. And now he has a good life. And again, that ends up being the point, is like he has a nice life that he enjoys. But it's just like at every turn, you're just watching his dreams get crushed over and over again. And he just kind of lets it happen. And I was like, if you didn't watch this in the context of watching a Christmas movie, the first hour and 40 minutes of this is just like a deeply depressing film, other than a few fun scenes here and there, all of which have nothing to do with Christmas. It's one of those movies, as we were sitting here watching this, I'm like imagining sitting around watching this at a Christmas party, or like having it on and like watching. I'm just like, this is...
Or like imagine like going to the theater in 1945, like, oh, we're gonna go see this Christmas movie, and then you're like sitting there
hour
like,
and a half later,
where's the Christmas?
What is it? When does it become Christmas, and when do we stop watching Jimmy Stewart be sad? I don't understand.
No, but I totally agree with you. Like, about George. He just gets roped into the grind, basically.
Yeah.
I found a lot to identify with. And then especially too, like kind of like the knife twist is that he then has to watch his younger brother get all of these things that he wanted.
He gets to go to college.
Yeah, he gets to go to college.
Go to the war.
Yeah.
Which was a thing that people wanted to do.
A thing
back
that
then,
people wanted to do, but that also means that he gets to like get out of the town and travel.
That's true. Yeah.
And he gets like a good job in a different city.
Yeah.
I was like, is this a millennial story?
Yes. People haven't changed. We're always the same people. There's just people forget that we're the same, that we've always been. Yeah. Yeah. I got to talk about this one little scene. It cracked me up so much. There's this scene where George is going, I don't remember the exact context, but he basically bumps into Violet out on the street and he's like, wants to take her on a date. He's like, oh, let's go on a date or whatever.
Yeah.
And then he's like explaining this date, that what he wants to do, and they're like standing in the middle of Main Street, like in the grass median or whatever, in the middle of Main Street, and he's like explaining, like, I want to go to the field and we'll dance with our shoes off and blah blah blah, like it's like romantic, like romanticist stuff or whatever. And she's just kind of looking at him like, what are you talking about? Like, what is your deal? And I love it's on a close up of him for this whole conversation, and then at the end she kind of like rebuffs him. She's like, I'm good. And then it pulls back to a wide shot and there is an entire crowd of people who all just start laughing at him. And I'm like, what? Wait. I started laughing. It got me so good because you don't see the crowd gather.
Yeah, it's a very tight shot on the two of them.
Yeah. And then it just pulls to this wide, and there's like 30 people crowd. I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you all crowded around these random people listening to their What is happening? And I guess he's being a little loud, but not like because he's being very animated. But it was such a strange scene. I was like, where did those people come from, and why are they just listening to your conversation? It's very strange, but it was very funny.
I don't know what causes this or what it's called, but I love the soft, glowy look that some black and white films have.
Yeah.
Not all of them have it. Some of them look almost like a moving, like newspaper photograph.
Yeah.
But this one in particular has like a very, like it's very soft and like diffused and glowy looking. And I love that.
I think the term might be bloom, which is a term with there's certain basically for the way light diffuses. I believe bloom would be the term that you're kind of what you're describing there, and I assume it has a lot to do with like different film stocks and grades and how it was shot and stuff like that. I don't know nearly anything about that sort of deeply technical like physical film stuff. I've never shot a movie on physical film. I've only ever taken pictures with physical film, so I'm hardly knowledgeable on like physical film medium. But yeah, I believe that what you're talking about there is called bloom, and it is there's also different ways, I'm sure, with how the film is processed and stuff like that, which can result in more or less bloom and that kind of thing. But it definitely gives a certain feel and look to older films and stuff like that.
Yeah. Another thing that I love in this movie is Mr. Potter's ornate wheelchair throne.
Yes.
I love
He
it
straight up
so
has
much.
a throne wheelchair. It's just like, you would. You would. There's this great scene, and after George is losing everything, they get a call from the
their daughter's sick.
Their daughter's sick
because she came home with her coat unbuttoned.
Yeah.
And then the teacher calls to check on her.
And George grabs the phone and starts berating this teacher for not
like making sure her coat was done up
or something.
Something. He's having a temper tantrum.
He's freaking out because again, his life is crumbling. It's somewhat understandable that he's just like taking this out willy nilly because again he thinks he's going to jail and his job or his whole career is ruined and blah blah blah, and he's financially ruined. Like things are about as bad as could be. So it's a little bit understandable, but he is a jerk and he takes it out on this teacher. And then he starts yelling at the husband. Gets on the phone. He starts yelling at him. And then later, he right before he goes to the bridge, he ends up at Martini's bar and he's drinking, and there's a guy sitting at the bar next to him, and it turns out to be the husband of the school teacher, and he hears the bartender say that it's George Bailey, and he goes, "What was your name?" And he's like, "George Bailey," and he stands up and just punches him in the face. And I was like, you know what? That guy, fair enough. That guy's kind of crushed it. Everything he does in that scene is kind of perfect. And he's just like, I was like, yeah, man, yep. I don't know if the movie is supposed for us to dislike that guy or like that guy, because I just liked him. He gets up, he punches George once in the face. And he's like, your kids are stupid and teachers aren't paid enough. And then as he's leaving, he goes, they're like throwing him out of the bar. He's like, no, I want to pay for my drink. And they're like, get out. And he's like, all right. And he just leaves. And I was like, I don't know if you could have handled that any better as that guy. He gets one punch in, says his piece, which is a great take, and then leaves, but wants to still pay for his drink that he didn't get to pay for yet. That guy's amazing.
I know, we had a very similar note here. I was like, honestly, good on that guy for standing up for his wife, a public school teacher.
Yeah.
Good for him.
I love my favorite. He's just like, your kids are fucking stupid. And my wife isn't paid enough. It's great. I love it. Oh, it was so good. So funny. There's this, so later after the wish scene happens, there's this great scene where he's going through the house that Mary bought, but it is once again now decrepit and falling apart because they never got married and they never bought the house and fixed it up. And as he's going through it, the cops pull up and they're shining a spotlight on him. And so this whole scene, and in particular, the moment where he comes back out of the house and Bert and Ernie, the police are waiting for him. And the way it's lit is just so striking. And it's just like, as he digs through the rubble of of his life that could be, and it's just backlit so dramatically where the light is like kind of like enveloping their faces, but they're all completely in silhouette, so you can't see them. It's just so striking and cool, and I thought it was just such a well-lit scene. And then also when he runs out of the house, or no, after he goes later, he then leaves and he goes to talk to his mom.
Yeah,
because he ends up at his mom's house and she doesn't recognize him either, and he starts freaking out and he runs out from his mom's house, and he's fully freaking out now because his mom didn't recognize him, and he turns and he's slowly turning, and it's a super tight close-up on his face, but he turns and he looks straight into the camera for a second, and you're like, oh my god. And it's such a great effective little moment to have somebody spike the camera like that in that moment. I thought it was so good and just such a brilliant little detail. We had this other thought as we were watching the movie that I could not stop cracking up about, which is that if this movie had really wanted to commit, because so it's established that because he's never been born, he wasn't able to save his brother from drowning. Mm-hmm. So his brother drowned when he was a little in the lake. And so obviously his brother never grew up and went off to be in World War II, where he was a Medal of Honor recipient. And we both were laughing at the idea of if this had turned into The Man in the High Castle, and when he comes back after making that wish, he's responsible for like Germany having won World War II, and he gets back into town and there's just like Nazi shit everywhere, and just the Third Reich has come to America, and it's just like, oh, because he didn't save his brother and his brother didn't save that aircraft carrier or whatever in the war, and so that was the thing that swung, and obviously it was silly, but like, and that was the thing that swung the whole war effort, was his brother being there to shoot down actually his brother would have been not in the German front, it would have been in Japan because he shot down a kamikaze bomber or whatever. Point being, maybe it's whatever, same thing. The Axis had won because George Bailey never existed, and so we're now existing in a 1945 America that is controlled by Axis powers. Would have been truly wild.
Yeah, truly wild. We would have needed more time to address that, I think.
Yeah. I get why they didn't do it, but it would have been very funny. And not fun, I don't know. It just would have been really interesting.
It would have been very unexpected.
Yes, it really would have been.
Another little thing that I thought was funny was that I love how alternate universe Mary when he yells, "That's my wife," she just immediately swoons.
Yeah.
He just like passes out.
Yeah. I will say my last note, I thought it was a little strange that I guess, and the movie just doesn't care. It's fine. But like the whole thing was like, well, you're missing $8,000. So that's going to be like, oh, you're embezzling the money. So like the bookkeeping's off. You've been doing something with that money. But then the way this is solved in the movie is a bunch of people just give them, more than $8,000 or
Yeah.
whatever. But the person, the bank investigator guy was there at the thing where everybody gives him the money. So you would think he would then have like they know at this point that the money was missing and that this is covering the money that was missing. Or because the bank inspector shows up at the end and even gives him some money.
Yeah.
And so I was like, how? Because I don't think the idea would be that, okay, the money's missing. If you can cover that money before the bank inspector realizes, obviously,
Then
great.
obviously
you could probably
fine.
make it work or whatever. You can cover the books to make it look like it's okay. But if he knows in some capacity, or is he, what does the bank inspector think is happening during this scene? I guess is my question. Because to me, it doesn't seem like, and maybe it was back in the day, like, oh, the money went missing. And now we have enough to cover it, and so it just doesn't matter. None of the rest of it matters.
Maybe
I don't know.
maybe it doesn't as long as your books are balanced. I have no idea.
Yeah, no, and I get that, but it's just I think that also lays bare part of the problem I had with it to begin with is that like he assumes they're going to go to jail over this, and I'm like, I don't know if that is how that would work. And maybe that's part of it is him like catastrophizing or whatever, and it's not actually the case that he'd likely go to jail over this. But it just felt like the whole thing just felt kind of clumsily wrapped up in a way. It was just like, I don't know if this really smooths things over as well as the movie wants us to think it does. Again, it works for thematically what we're going for.
Right.
He's helped people.
And now they help him.
And now they help him. Great. Who cares? Like the details. I get it. It's fine. I just thought it was a little bit, especially having the bank inspector be there. I was like, I don't know if that. Okay, whatever. Sure. Fine.
Also, while we're on the subject of that, I just want to say how good of a friend his friend Sam is.
Yeah, right?
Who is no explanation needed. Why are you
Here's
up to $25,000?
Yeah, especially because like he's the ultimate anti-incel. Like his whole arc, he's been like jealous that George was getting with Mary, and then at the end he's like, nah, screw it. Here you go. You need some money. I'm cool with it. Like he's become a very successful businessman, and like he totally doesn't even care that George is with Mary. He's like over it. It's fine, which I thought was nice. That's good. Good for Sam.
Everybody needs a Sam.
That's true. Before we get to the final verdict, we wanted to remind you can do us a giant favor by heading over to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or Goodreads, any of our social media platforms. Go follow us, give us a like, and interact. Let us know what you thought about It's a Wonderful Life. We'd love to hear about it and what you had to say. Also, you could do us a giant favor. We don't say this enough. But if you want to go to like iTunes or it's not even called iTunes anymore, Apple Music or Apple Podcasts or whatever, or anywhere where you can leave a review for our show, go do it. Give us a 5-star review. It's very helpful and helps get us recommended to more people who are trying to find new podcasts. So yeah, do that for us. And then finally, the last thing you can do to support us, which is, the best thing for us, at least specifically, is head over to patreon.com/thisfilmislit and give us a couple bucks a month for some bonus content. At the $5 and up level, you get access to a bonus episode every month and the entire back catalog of bonus episodes. This month, we're talking about the Santa Claus. That episode should be out right before Christmas weekend. Last month, we talked about Labyrinth. We got all kinds of stuff. We talk about just anything we want, not movies that are not based on books primarily for the most part, because we're saving the other ones for the podcast. So it's generally stuff that is not based on books. But yeah, go check out patreon.com/thisfilmislit. Katie, it's time for the final verdict.
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first. Verdict afterward.
The Greatest Gift by Philip Van Doren Stern is a cute short story. If you have a family tradition of reading 'Twas the Night Before Christmas and that kind of thing aloud on Christmas Eve, you could just add this one to the repertoire. It's perfect for something like that. However, it's a short story that's well under 20 pages, and it does end up feeling a little lightweight. Characters are kind of one-dimensional. There's a lot about the plot that you're just expected to jump on board with, and there's really only one theme, that life is a gift and you should cherish it. And again, it's a short story. All of that stuff is fine and understandable, but it becomes very noticeable when you start comparing it to a much meatier version of the same story. It's a Wonderful Life came to the table with a much more fleshed out world and characters, especially its protagonist, George. It provides an interesting backstory to explain how the fantastical events of the last quarter of the film came to pass, and it deftly incorporates additional themes that also fit with it being a Christmas movie, namely goodwill and compassion towards your fellow humans, as well as a healthy dollop of anti-capitalism and a middle finger to rich assholes. It's like if A Christmas Carol was about the entire community coming together to support Bob Cratchit instead of Scrooge learning the error of his ways. And in a way, I do feel that that's a more crucial message in the year of our Lord 2022. Take care of each other, because nobody's sending out ghosts to visit Jeff Bezos. And so for those reasons, I'm giving this one to the movie. Merry Christmas, you old building and loan.
Fantastic. Couldn't agree more. Katie, what's next?
Well, we will be taking our customary week off after Christmas, so there will not be an episode out on Wednesday, December 28th. However, keep an eye on our social medias because we will be running polls during that week, because our first episode of 2023 will be a listener's choice. We will be covering a literary heavy hitter that we somehow haven't gotten to yet, Dame Agatha Christie. The episode will be about Murder on the Orient Express, with a choice between the 1974 and 2017 film adaptations.
Yes. So go, like you said, go follow us on Facebook and all those Twitter, Instagram, all those places, so you can vote and let us know which one you would rather hear us talk about, because I don't have a preference.
I don't either.
But I am excited to watch it because I actually I've never seen any adaptation of Murder on the Orient Express, or I've never read it either. I know nothing about the story other than Hercule Poirot, right?
Yeah,
is
I think so.
Detective or whatever.
And they're on a train.
Yeah, they're on a train, and there's a bunch of people who one of them may be the murderer or something like that. It's literally all I know about this
and
movie.
we love a good murder mystery.
Yes.
So that should be a good episode.
Awesome.
So let us know which movie you want us to watch and talk about.
There you go. So yeah, come back in 2 weeks' time for a prequel episode, and in 1 week's time, come back and vote. No, don't come here, but come to social media and vote for what you want us to cover. And in 2 weeks' time, we're talking about we'll do some previewing of Murder on the Orient Express, and we'll see what people had to say about It's a Wonderful Life. Until that time, guys, gals, non-binary pals, and everybody else,
keep reading books,
keep watching movies,
and keep being awesome.
And have a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays, however you celebrate. Or if you don't, that's fine too.